It's 7 a.m. on the East Coast. It's Sunday, February 8th, and this is Fox & Friends Weekend. Officials are still racing to find Nancy Guthrie before it's too late.
The 84-year-old has been missing for more than a week. Her family sending a new message to their mother's abductors saying they will pay the ransom for Nancy's safe return. Watch.
We received your message, and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay.
But Fox News contributor Jonathan Turley warns that any money transferred might be untraceable.
What is chilling, Charlie, about this case is that new technology has removed one of the great barriers for these types of kidnappings. Bitcoins allow people to get money that is less traceable. It simply has become easier for people to create these types of transfers without traceable links. And I think that the FBI is obviously very concerned.
Meanwhile, the search expanding with digital billboards showing Nancy's information appearing in neighboring states as Fox News confirms law enforcement now looking into a nearby Circle K gas station.
However, officials say they have no suspects, persons of interest, or vehicles connected to the case. This comes ahead of the second reported ransom deadline, which is apparently set for tomorrow evening.
For the very latest, we go on the ground to Alicia Acuna, who's live outside Nancy's home in Tucson. Good morning, Alicia.
Good morning, Griff. The FBI tells the Associated Press that when Savannah Guthrie in that video says, "We received your message," she is referencing a second note that was sent to local station KOLD here on Friday. And KOLD says that note, not released to the public, did not contain proof of life. Separately, KGUN 9, another local outlet which received one of the original notes, says the ransom demand is $6 million in Bitcoin and are threatening Nancy Guthrie's life if it is not received by 5 p.m. Monday. Last night, investigators returned to Annie Guthrie's home and spent about 2.5 hours there. Our Fox News Digital reports they saw what appeared to be flashes coming from a camera inside the garage and then again in another part of the house. When they left, a deputy could be seen carrying a white container and a brown paper bag. One of the Pima County deputies was also seen wearing latex gloves as they were leaving the home. It did not appear that any family members were at the house at the time. Last night, around 7 p.m., 2 sheriff's deputies arrived here at Nancy Guthrie's home. It is unclear why, but they were seen talking to the private security guard on site. And Griff, after you asked me about investigators going through terrain again last night, we went back and checked our Fox flight team's video from last night. You are correct. These are images of someone in the back of the home searching with flashlights. And Rachel, on Saturday morning, you asked about the proximity of the neighbors' homes. We waited until it was daylight to answer that question.
So what were Nancy Guthrie's neighbors able to see and hear, and how could that help investigators? With that in mind, we wanted to give you a different point of view. So you've got Nancy's house, it's in the middle, and the lots are large enough for privacy. We walked to the front of the properties, and on one side, mailbox to mailbox, it's about 300 feet. On the other side, it's a little closer. But with both homes that flank her house, there are lines of vegetation, there's space and cactus. And from what we could gather, it appears the neighbors to the back may have the best vantage point to her home. And hopefully someone back there has a door cam pointed in the right direction.
And again, the Pima County Sheriff says at this time they have no suspects or person of interest. Back to you guys.
No, but Alicia, that video is quite instructive. It is such great reporting because you're very right. There is chance, and we have seen, you know, it was days later that they even got to the camera that was on the roof of Nancy's house, but have they exhausted all of those potential line of sight, even despite the vegetation and rural area? You know, have they exhausted every neighboring camera? And we just don't know that, right?
We don't know at this point, and it's very well that the FBI could have some of those images or many of those images in their possession right now. But what is even difficult to see, even with the vantage point we just got you, we talked about the homes in the back. Our crew walked around, our producer walked around to the back, and you can see from there under the trees there is a more direct line of sight. It's still hard to see from up above, but that was the impression that we got. Very curious, though, they're out there still searching again last night, 1 week ago, since she was last seen.
Yeah, I have to believe that in Tucson, but maybe even across the country, a lot of elderly people buying cameras and security cameras, because this is just a reminder of how important it is to have that kind of security in case anything happens. I know you're from that area, you're from the Tucson area, you're an Arizona girl, and right now there's a lot of talk about not just this investigation, but specifically the sheriff. The fact that the sheriff went to a basketball game almost at the same time that this video was being released, this latest video was being released, which was so gut-wrenching, of basically Savannah and her siblings saying, "We're ready to pay you." It was a short video. But it's sort of jarring to see an investigation reaching this kind of a emotional moment, and the sheriff is at a basketball game. What is the talk in the town right now? I mean, this is an elected official. This is maybe the biggest case that's ever come in this area, in this community. What are you hearing?
Well, Rachel, I can tell you that actually as I was arriving in Tucson last Monday night, I was already receiving messages from family members and friends regarding the sheriff, and to set my expectations on what we might see here on the ground in terms of effectiveness. We have heard from other law enforcement. I've heard from family members of law enforcement here in Tucson not hearing a great deal of confidence, and there is some concern. Sheriff Chris Nanos won his election in 2024. There was a recount. He beat the Republican here by 481 votes. So I think you are correct in your assessment there and in your observations. It was jarring and quite striking to see him at that University of Arizona basketball game last night.
You know, that the drone shot you just showed really was a remarkable, you really could get a sense of what the neighborhood looks like there. Looking at that, you get a real feel that obviously there probably is no other egress or exit from the building, from her home, except through the driveway if you're trying to smuggle somebody out.
If you're talking about a vehicle, Charlie,
yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see any kind of access from the very back side.
I mean, you'd have to go through several people's yards to get to another road from that.
Exactly, and it's not smooth. It's not a smooth walk. If you're talking in terms of like a level place to walk, it would have to have been somewhere in the front of this area or the side of the home as well. And remember, there were drops of blood found by the front door, also a trail into the gravel. We do not know when that blood arrived there, if it was there before or after Nancy Guthrie disappeared, but we do know that the DNA testing on that, according to authorities, came back as positive for Nancy Guthrie.
All right.
Just one last question, because when we look at your great drone footage, it's daylight. But when you consider the fact that because of the light restrictions that have been in place in that area for a long time to protect wildlife and the like, it would have been extremely dark. And it would suggest that these alleged abductors were familiar with the area because it would be operating in such a dark and difficult sort of terrain.
That's a really good point, Griff, because it is, say for these television lights that are here right now lighting it up, it is pitch black. So there would have to be a certain level of knowledge, you have to imagine, and investigators have kind of made that point as well. There had to have been at least some familiarity at a minimum with this location, this neighborhood, knowing that there aren't a whole lot of cameras out here that can really, access the road because homes are so far back in a lot of places. But also from what we heard, that there was probably some sort of knowledge of the technology involved in this house because there were a number of cameras inside that home. And as far as we've heard, They don't have images from inside or around the house.
All right, Alicia Acuna, great
Thank you,
reporting.
Alicia. We'll be checking back in with you throughout the day.
You know, Charlie, Griff, Griff and I were talking prior to the show about those 45 minutes before she exited the house. Griff was saying, I remember going, you know, when he goes to pick up his mom to take her out to lunch, how long it takes to get her out of the house. I was talking about how, I mean, my mom is around the same age as Nancy Guthrie, and she's kind of like a lot of older women who are vulnerable, kind of a scaredy cat. I don't know if my mom would even survive that exit, just thinking that Alicia said that she could have come out the front door, but did they go out on these, you know, rockier areas? Just the fear, the terror. I mean, all of this is just a nightmare.
It is.
I mean, I can't imagine what this woman has been through.
Yeah. With that, let's bring in Bill Daly, former FBI investigator. Bill, thank you for joining us again this morning.
Good to be here.
Obviously, here we are a week later, and Rachel was talking about, you know, just the sheer difficulty of moving an individual, 84 years old, frail because of a medical condition. This really was probably very difficult for her.
Oh, I would imagine so. And I would imagine we're also talking about a complication where we know she's had some underlying medical conditions, the pacemaker issue, some medication that's required. So, you know, combine that together. And I just tell you is that the stress on anyone, never mind someone of that age with those kind of frailties, is extremely overwhelming. You know, Griff, I think it's, you know, we are kind of 1 week into this investigation. Sometimes it's good to take a little bit step back. We hear a lot of people talk about, you know, all kinds of details around this case. But I'd probably like to highlight just two main areas. One is that, you know, these letters that have been received, these ransom notes have been now received. We believe there's, you know, at least 2 series of them have been received, and confirmed by Alicia that the FBI said that they're working on that, the last letter, and have verified that it at least corresponds to the earlier letters. Again, the veracity of them overall is still perhaps in question. But I think it goes to show you that, A, we're dealing with people, at least on that side, on the communication side, you know, somewhat sophisticated. I'd probably say, you know, a handful of years ago, I would be stretched to find any kidnap case where people are using Bitcoin, is that's typically been reserved for kind of cyber extortions, where people holding computer systems at ransom, and people who are quite familiar. Imagine somebody's more adept at using kind of technology. And similar here is that you have to have someone who's also using technology to kind of mask their location. They're using some type of cloaking software. They're bouncing around with different servers, perhaps around the world, to disguise where they're actually communicating from. So that side is a bit more sophisticated than we've seen before. And I'd probably say that's something that you know, because of that, and because they've been quite coy in the fact that they're only communicating through these technological communications and not directly to the family. As we can see, if they were, the family wouldn't be speaking openly on a microphone. And just one other thing, I'd like to talk about the other side of this investigation. On the other side, it's a much more pragmatic one. And that is, as we talk about all these details around how Nancy, you know, has gone missing, they are looking at actually physically how she would have been moved. I mean, it's kind of completing that trail, and to see how she physically was moved and what kind of vehicle. We know from, unfortunately, the recent Brown University investigation is that, you know, people have now become quite clever, changing license plates. And it's unfortunate when we talk about all these things. I think the underlying issue is more and more of these criminals are learning from what they've either seen or heard, what was out there on the internet, and real cases, and it makes it much more challenging for law enforcement.
So we're tight on time here, but could you give us sort of your top line view of this latest video made by Savannah and her siblings?
Sure, I'd probably say, you know, they want to make the kidnappers, assuming that they have her mother, that they are willing to pay. That they've said that very, very openly, so there's no question around that. If in the past it had been kind of vague, they want to make sure that that point is driven home. And this issue of kind of the timeline, we've heard some things, we actually haven't seen any documentation, but, you know, it's not that uncommon in kidnap cases where there be kind of threats made. Unfortunately, sometimes they're much more kind of, you know, audio communicated with that kind of compels people to pay. In this case, they're now saying we're willing to pay, and they just want to know those terms and be able to work on getting their mother back. So I think that's that's a direct communication saying, okay, we're now at that point. We want to pay. We now need to kind of work on a proof of life, and we need to get her back.
Bill, you talked about how sophisticated this person must be just in terms of the way they're asking to be paid through Bitcoin, et cetera. The early theory, based on the fact that these ransom notes were sent to the local media, was that this was a local guy. Do you still feel that that's the case, that this is a local Tucson or Arizona-based person? Or do you think that this could be part of a wider network, maybe a transnational thing, or are we still working with that theory that it's somebody local?
Well, I certainly, in law enforcement, you don't like to rule anything out completely out until it's out. But, I think in this case, he also communicated with TMZ, which is located in Los Angeles. So, there's a bit of kind of that dichotomy there. So I'm not convinced that it's just a local, local incident, a local communicator, somebody who's sending these messages out. I think, Rachel, to your point, well taken, is that, this person is kind of using these various, communication devices and these outlets because they're not communicating with the family, and that may present more of a challenge to them. I would also like to just kind of compliment, because I've been on the other side of some of these cases where, the media is involved, and this obviously is being, just kind of communicated out there as we see in the media. It complicates things for law enforcement, is that very little with regard to details around these letters has been communicated by these news outlets, and I give them a tremendous amount of credit because of the ethical aspects of this, where it's kind of a life and death. And it'd be very easy for someone to get a scoop on the story and kind of say, well, here's a copy of the letter, and they're not doing that. And I think that goes a long way to preserving the integrity of the investigation.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
Good point.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye-bye.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.